That's fine. No, that didn't seem right. Why are they not shaded in? Oh.
Warming up.
We'll roll with it.
Well, at least we'll check if it's when connecting.
Yeah, I haven't shifted the internet around, so let me try that too. Whoa, suddenly went 0 for a second. Reallocating internet's priority.
Well, I see us on YouTube.
Well, that's a good start.
I don't see us yet on Facebook.
No, I see it's on
there. I see it now.
I tag you. Oh wow, I misspelled it.
Okay, the monitors seem to be running. Things seem to be in place.
Copying. My studio link. Can I change the title?
Because of the typo.
Oh yeah. At least for people who join from this point onward, they will see the correct title, I hope. Can you refresh your YouTube link? It's a subtle one, this typo. It worked? No. Hooray, mid-stream editing. Okay, I'm very worried about our internet connections. It's saying 0 out of 10.
Although it's showing in the monitor.
What?
See, they're running with me.
Okay, well, I guess that's fine.
Hey, GM. Here for the shady trees, I see.
Coincidentally, I think the last time we actually played Photosynthesis was with GM. When I was looking for photos, like it was the last game.
Hey, Pico.
Hello, Pico.
Long time no see. It's 9:06, so do we give it a few more minutes?
No, at least a minute, like so that but at least we have time.
But it's a Monday, folks, which means we are covering another board game. I think it's generally board games for Mondays, or are we going to make it board games and games in general?
We still have enough games in our collection to keep Mondays just board games for now. I mean, like tabletop games in terms of board games, card games, and the like. I don't know about RPGs. RPGs, we can move them to Mondays, or we can slide them into random Wednesdays when we don't have Wednesday games. I mean, there's no like absolute rule on it yet. But then so far we've been keeping Mondays very board gamey in case like our board game retail friends decide to dig up content. Then hey, we have board game stuff every Monday. That's also why we codified this to get that started. Whew, yeah. Anything else?
But it's been a very well. It's been a lighter Monday than the last few Mondays.
But doesn't make it not busy.
Yeah,
It
that's still a
was
busy one.
yeah.
And then
We had many simultaneous conference calls today.
and then temperature continues to be a cruel thing. There's new stuff.
Oh, it's the Miji. Their ship date has been pushed to November, but they're showing off many of the components that are part of the Kickstarter.
Were they evergreened?
Huh?
Were they evergreened?
I don't know. They just mentioned that it's hard to ship. Okay, I guess we should start.
Because any shipping delays, I now end up wondering if it's an evergreen situation.
But it looks like they're not quite in full production either. So I feel it's still more COVID than anything. I mean, like, it's a weird update to show us blank boxes of what the game is going to be in.
Okay, starting the timer, and let's start the episode. This is Toby,
And this is Rocky.
and if it's your first time here, welcome to Baduy Pride, our little space on the internet where we talk about anything we want.
This is completely unscripted and not entirely accurate. I'm going to yawn. Okay. But at least it's honest. Join us as we talk about everything and anything, random live.
And if it's not your first time here, thank you so much for joining us again. Tonight's episode is The Shady Trees of Photosynthesis, which is our Monday board game episode. We are talking, of course, about the board game
Photosynthesis.
Photosynthesis.
Which, you know, on its own doesn't sound like a very exciting title because, oh, it's how plants, you know, convert sunlight and water and stuff into food things. But it's quite a compelling game. This game was actually a gift. This copy was a gift from my office mates.
Mhm,
Although it's like, oh, what a risk getting a board game. They consulted with you, right?
mhm,
Okay, that's why it was safe.
mhm.
But yeah, and it's admittedly, when I first saw the game, I was thinking sort of like Tokaido Takenoko, like, oh, Zen plant feels.
It's not.
It's not.
To be more precise, as one of our viewers, GM, stated, Shady Trees.
It's a super and a very literal shady game.
Released back in 2017, Photosynthesis have you playing different trees competing for sunlight as they try to grow taller, and the sun actually moves around the playboard.
And that's definitely now that I think about it. Although the component isn't interesting, the mechanic was brilliant. The sun moves around the board angle, and that impacts which trees have sunlight, and thus impacts many other things because sunlight is very important. So let's break down mechanics. What do we got?
So Photosynthesis has you spending action points to do actions per round. You have a struggle for area majority as you try to control portions of the board. You have end game bonuses. There's an interesting hexagonal grid. And most interestingly, you have pieces that visually show you as you progress through the game.
Okay, as far as games go, though, I felt like they kind of checked out in terms of how they designed the actual game box.
Mhm.
Not a great insert. The board is like very plain. It's a big hexagon, and Mitch and Carlo have joined. Hello, but it's a bunch of circles inside a hexagon.
The board shows the different regions that you try to compete for control. The outermost region, the inner green region, and the central region. The different areas have their own benefits and point values in the game, which is helpfully denoted by each individual player's board. And you will notice they are
Different but the same because they're codified to your particular tree type. Although I don't think trees are actually blue, but it's okay. I work with this.
But the board nicely tells you the different action point costs in order to do certain things. And if you're wondering how to make sense of it, because it doesn't seem to be that clear right now, it's because you don't have the trees on the board right now.
Yeah, if it's hard to tell, and I'm trying to angle the board, but you'll see there are little X marks that represent where the trees stand.
And we're talking about trees. We mean trees. Trees come in three sizes. Three sizes. Yeah. uh, from the small ones to the medium ones and the tallest ones. Each player, of course, has their own type of tree, which is specific to their color. So this game is quite a visual delight. There is a level of cuteness to it that helps disguise the cutthroat nature of the game.
Side fact: I feel like these trees, whenever I'm sure it's just the most practical way to do trees. But if you also have a copy of Tang Garden, they also went with this particular method for creating trees out of cardboard, and it works. It works well enough.
So seeing that there are trees, seeing that you have boards, and the other the other pieces of the game include small tokens, which represent seeds, larger tokens, which represent point values, and the last part being that one, which probably doesn't make sense.
It's the sun, or it's a very skinny Pac-Man.
Because that one makes sense when you consider the board has areas where the sun would then be casting down.
I'm trying to think.
You have to find a corner. There.
There. Then see, this means the sun is coming from here.
And then later in the round, it will move to another area.
There are arrows on the sun that remind you where it's pointing. But yeah, so it's like it aligns to the corner.
Wait, that's not visible.
It aligns to the corner. And funnily, they cheated because it's not a perfect hexagon. It's actually
hexagon with corners.
It's a hexagon with corners, which makes it what is it? The decagon, because it's 12 sides, really, not 6.
So you might have the sun here, but later on the sun moves, and it's now I can't find it. There.
Yeah, it's off the board. Waka 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 waka.
And that direction is important because the trees, by their very nature, occupy spaces on the board. And as they occupy spaces on the board, the location of the sun determines which ones get sunlight. If the sun, for example, was coming from here, this side, then this tall tree would actually prevent these two smaller trees, you don't see them, from getting sunlight. And that's a large part of what the game is about. You plan how the plants grow, which trees grow, which one throw out seeds, because you're anticipating by what turn does the sun move.
Yes. So when we go back to this board, then things kind of make a bit more sense. So this section here on the far left just tracks how much sunlight your trees gather in a particular turn. And in the beginning, it starts very small, but then you can get more
sunlight being the currency that you spend in order to do things.
And we determine sunlight based on the trees that you have on the board, where the sun is coming from, and if you have a direct path from the sun to your tree. Then yes, the height of the tree matters. So if it is small trees in front and bigger trees behind, both will get sunlight. But if it's a bigger tree in front and smaller trees behind, the smaller trees don't get sunlight.
The basic system behind it is, since trees come in 3 levels.
Trees come in 3 levels.
The shadow they cast is based on their level. So the tallest trees cast shadows up to 3 spaces behind them.
That's why they're shady. Because they throw shade all the time. Okay, then based on that, all of the bright yellow icons represent how much you would spend for these particular actions. The main thing on the bottom of the board is this life cycle, where how much it takes to put a seed onto the board and then grow that seed into a small tree, grow it into a medium tree, and grow it into a large tree.
As expected, the taller your tree, the further away the seeds can be thrown.
Oh yeah, your tree height also determines how far you can send them.
That's here in the lowest, wherein the youngest trees can only throw a seed adjacent to themselves. The bigger ones throw further, and so on and so forth. Sunlight is also paid in order to grow your trees taller, and It's only when they are at their tallest that you can cash them in for points.
Now, the other funny thing about this, which is not obvious when the board is like this, is that so we have this is actually sort of your reserve
Mhm.
of trees. So like if this were here, then
You would start with a number of trees on your board, and you have to pay sunlight to get them out of your board to place them onto the player area.
I don't know what to call that process precisely, but then that's like the first thing that
It is a delicate dance, however, because you are limited by the spaces on your board. So, for example, you start with trees on the main board, and if those grow to the largest height, and then you cash them in for points, if you do not have space in the main board to return them there, they're removed from the game, which means you're playing with less trees for the rest of the game.
yeah, and it applies to all your components. So the number one thing is like you tend to lose seeds.
Mhm.
Because once you turn a seed into a tree, it has to go back here. But if you haven't gathered seeds,
If you haven't released more seeds to make
Yeah.
more space,
then
then you might have
you
to throw away that
tokens,
seeds.
and you'll
Yes.
permanently reduce the amount of stuff you have. But it's totally understandable too, because you have to sort of try to maximize your turns. Okay,
Mhm.
depending on the number of players and such, you only play for a certain number of rotations around the board. I think typically it's
Yes.
two full circuits around the board. Oops, that's the French manual. Oop, that's not English
We
again.
have so many manuals.
Oh, nope. Yeah, this multilingual edition comes with many languages, and so we're still trying to find it. I
Yeah.
think that's it.
Ending around. All players take a turn. The first player is passed on to the next player clockwise. And then end of the game. The game ends when the sun has completed three revolutions
revolutions.
around the board. And trust me, that goes through real fast.
Because a revolution is only 6 turns, and so that's only 18 actions for all players.
The manual is beautifully illustrated. It tries to help you visualize and see how to prep the board. You can see here examples of how the sunlight flies out, the motions of the seeds, them explaining how height affects sunlight reach. So it's a beautifully crafted game. There's been a lot of attention to the small details.
And there's a lot of like, hey, you like the art on the board for no reason. Then if you just want the art, they took the time to give you just the trees on the back. And it is quite beautiful.
Functionally, it works even if it's still a mess. They provide spaces for each color. There is no clear way to store the trees properly.
Yeah, I do a lot of like back and forth by size.
And then admittedly, they have these little notches on the side that supposedly allow you to store the other stuff on top of it. But it seems a bit too big.
Because even if it's sized to the boards, then it's still like,
So we're not
What's
exactly
going
sure.
on?
We're not exactly sure what happened there.
yeah.
But we are happy that the boards did take into account that you would want to store things without crushing the trees. Because when your
I put
trees
the board on top.
when your trees have been prepared and folded into place, the last thing you want would be to have to fold them or disassemble them when you put them back in the box.
Yeah, so it's a barely functional box. It gets the job done, but you kind of wish that they took a bit more effort. I don't know. I mean, like it's a minor conceit. So I try to cram it under. It's not perfect.
Put that right.
Nope.
It's upside down. So that, in brief, is photosynthesis.
So number one, surprisingly simple game. I mean, like in terms of mechanics that you have to teach, there isn't that much. It's as long as once people understand the abacus nature of your player board and how you go through your tree life cycle from seed to small to medium to large tree, the basic mechanic is not that difficult to pick up. It's when you get on the board and you start playing with other players that you start to realize, holy crap, these trees be shady. Because it's super tight in terms of available space. And it is inevitable that you will be casting shadows on your other trees sooner or later.
Your own trees, even.
Sometimes your own trees will be the one that will casting shadows on your stuff. And then the other caveat is like, because you want to get to the biggest size so that you can harvest the tree and get points. Because that's the only way to win in the game, by getting points. but
Keeping the bigger trees allows you to collect more sunlight.
yes, so then you're like, do I take away my main resource
Producer.
production stuff, or do I harvest points and
Or-
get ready for the
Or
end of the
do I
game?
gamble and keep them longer in hopes of planting more seeds? But then those very trees are collecting sunlight, but can be keeping you from collecting more sunlight with your new trees.
And the points that you get are based on where you are on the board. And you notice there are leaves on the board earlier. So the outermost is like a one leaf token, whereas the innermost is a four leaf token. So naturally, you would argue that it's a race to get to the center so that you can have the awesome tree in the middle.
But the moment someone's in the center, everyone's squatting and waiting for that tree to die.
And every tree is going to cast shade on that tree. It's very painful. It's once you are in that middle spot, you're like, aha, 4 points, and then aha, I'm never going to grow.
There's no uprooting to replant trees. There's only growing them to the highest to the highest heights in order to then cash them in for points. But the game, just so you can imagine, this box contains a total of 24 seed tokens, 32 small trees, 16 medium trees, 8 large trees, and 4 light point trackers. Yes, the game does have an expansion. We
I
do
did
have
not know it
expansion.
has an
I
expansion.
ignored it because I was thinking we weren't playing this as often as
That
we
is
wanted
true.
to.
I'm guilty that we haven't been
So I
playing it.
ignored it, but there is an expansion which deals with nighttime
And
nocturnal-
animals.
Yeah,
Okay. So Karen's asking who designed the game. And this was designed by Hjalmar Hach. I'm probably not pronouncing that correctly. But this is the same guy who has been involved in games like Railroad Inc., The King's Dilemma,
Get on
and
21.
Dragon Castle, which I've been super
Yeah, let's look at 21. There.
Oh,
Let's see
we all?
because there might be others that we are more familiar
I've
with.
been tempted by Dragon Castle only because Mahjong, Fantastic
You
Hall
did
of
the
Fame.
kick-ass board game.
Wow, and that kick-ass the comic book. Omega Jump. So many Railroad Inks, of
Yeah.
course.
The others are not that familiar.
Why? Wait.
And that's it.
Oh, that's it. It's all
Yeah,
21.
So
Okay,
so we pretty
it's
much
mostly Railroad Inks. So it's kind of funny. GM chimes in. It's rarely worth it. The middle spot, in my opinion. I feel that way too until Toby gets points.
I think it's worth it in the sense of the initial big bang of points, but then spending more terms to keep a hold of it isn't as worth as cashing in more smaller points. But it is tricky though because by getting more control of the outermost ring, you can suffocate others from getting points.
Yeah.
So you
And
have to plan
we've
it
seen
carefully.
that it's sort of like in Settlers of Catan, where if you build your roads right, you can stop other people's productions. In the same way that if you map out your trees sufficiently, you could be that shady guy who is casting shadows for like an entire sun phase. But just be prepared that the sun will turn and you will be on the
Yes.
receiving end of your own shade.
It's not uncommon in this game to feel frustrated that you're timing it wrong, and by the time the sun gets to you, there's a tree now in the way. So it's an interesting way that this game works out.
Surprisingly, so this game supports 2 to 4 players,
Mhm.
and oh my god, it's already tight at 2. I'm not even kidding. And 4 is brilliantly cutthroat. I'm super game for it.
There, so we have a game in progress in the example. You see the player board with all the trees that haven't been released yet. You have a sample of the board with all the trees vying for power, and you see the sun is down there.
Now, as much as the art is beautiful and all these things, and we can open up the box again, there's something I want to pull out. There is like weird elements of the design of this game that I kind of was a little disappointed.
Mhm.
Oops. And this is best evidenced by the so they throw in these weird components which I'm not like a super fan of. So number one, your first player token is a token. It's just the tree from the cover box, which is like neither here nor there. And then they introduce these round reminders, and it's just the number with the sun. And I don't know if this needed to be a disc.
It's basically your ability. It's what you use to count how many revolutions the sun has done in the game. But admittedly, for a game that looks this pretty, this feels like an afterthought.
Yeah, then
This feels boring.
and then because they already did circles, then we might as well do circles again.
I feel like this could have been seasons
Yeah,
or something more thematic.
I don't know.
I mean, we are
like,
talking about 4. So
there's so much beauty in the game. I mean, the trees aren't just different colors, but they are different like depictions of types of trees. Each tree has unique seeds to them, so you know that look, this has pine cones, and the other one was an acorn.
and if you look carefully, some of them have animals.
Yeah, so there's like it's a weird mix of like a lot of love in like the core design,
Zero.
but then again, terrible box lining, and and these weird tokens. So that's just like that's a minor thing. Like
Mhm.
it doesn't stop you from enjoying the game, but I just don't get it. Like I feel like they could have pushed it a bit more and like made it like super awesome out of the park, considering how well this stands out. And this thing's heavy. Yeah, it's a relatively heavy box because of the
Mhm.
cardboard, and it has no wooden pieces and all these things. You're looking for automata rules.
Yeah, I'm checking if it's official. I don't know if this was a fan creation.
It
or if
looks
it's,
like a fan.
Yeah, it looks like a fan who just made a lot of automata rules.
Yeah. So, but in all iterations of the game, whether you're playing 2 players or 4, it gets very tight. At 4 players, oh my god, it's all out war for the forest. Because if you're not blocking trees directly, I've seen people throw seeds aggressively. And it's like being that person in the parking lot who stands in front of a space and says, I'm gonna park here. My friend's just coming around. So yeah, which feels like a dick move, but that's what you're doing in this forest. And I am guilty of this as well, where I will cast out seeds into a wide net, and like one day I'm gonna grow a tree there. But then I will also wait for the sun to be in my
Mhm.
favor, so that when the trees appear, then I'm good.
We like playing this game and mixing our small mini figures of my neighbor Totoro.
Yeah, so we've little Totoro figures running around this forest. That's kind of funny. I should have used one of those pictures. But I guess the main challenge for the game is just getting used to that weird cycle of. I think we understand clearly like how a seed becomes different sizes of trees,
Mhm.
but that relationship with the player board that you need to purchase it and get it off the board
Mhm.
before you can grow it doesn't feel super intuitive.
It's a weird
to me.
disconnect because you don't just buy them and place them. You buy them, then put them aside,
Yes.
and then you can then place them, which has that.
And both actions, whether buying it or growing it, cost sunlight. So it's just weird. I can't like if we're trying to like realistically depict the life cycle of trees. I don't know what this buying action
Mhm.
is.
I mean, it could have been maybe the board could have had a spot called the germination spot or something,
I don't know.
and you could like place them there before you move them out or something. It could have had more thought behind that.
Yeah, and then but in all the times we played it, it's like oh boy, very challenging, very challenging game. It's definitely one of those games that it feels like a puzzle,
Mhm.
and you want to solve it. You totally want to figure it out, and we may not play it a lot, but it's still a delightful game. It's just also it was in an awkward place in the house, and like I had to dig it out. Because that's just the nature of this our game collection at home. We can only manage so many games into our brains.
So tactics.
Um, watch the sun.
Mhm.
It's very tempting to make a tree wall in the sense that you want to dominate a side,
Mhm.
but the best way, I mean, don't put them literally right next to each other because
You'll block.
you are
yourself.
definitely blocking yourself in at least one rotation of the sun, sometimes
Mhm.
more.
Pay attention to the fact that time does matter in this game and affects the game because time means the sun is casting in a different direction. So plan ahead Sometimes you might even have to plan 3, 4 moves ahead. Not just the move you want, but already planning with what you believe the opponents might do to block your move.
Yeah, or even like when you're thinking about your trees, like, okay, it's kind of bad when they're together, but if I grow this other tree before the sun gets to that angle, then even though they're in blocking radius of one
I'm still
another,
high enough.
he's high enough so he gets sunlight. So there, that's the ebb and flow of this game. It's just trying to juggle that mechanic, and then like I said, as much as it's like super annoying, plan out your seeds very well. Well, I've seen we'll see this race towards the middle area. People just throwing seeds there and like
not
and
letting
not
them
growing.
grow.
Yeah, it's just like I'm over here. Just so that you have a spot. And more than anything, please remember, the only way to score points is to get trees fully completed. All your sunlight activities, no matter how many trees you have on the board, no how many seeds are in play, nothing. They mean nothing. The only victory points in the game is when you get them to full height and then totally take them off the board and claim one of the point tokens. Also, given the 4 levels of points in the game, note that the tokens are not all the same value. You start with the most expensive for that tier, and then you work your way down.
So the sooner you cash in a tree, the higher the points you're getting.
And because the designer decided to throw in a random, evil mechanic, which is again supports how cutthroat this game is, you keep your points tokens face down. It is not open information. People do not know how many points you have, and therefore cannot accurately determine who is leading in the game.
The deepest scoring points go as high as 22. The middle areas are around 19. The the outer areas are around 17, and the outermost are 14 and lower.
The points drop quite dramatically.
So while it does still give you points to have 2 trees completed in the outermost area, that's probably not enough to beat someone who got the middlemost and an outermost area as well.
And I think, I forget how many trees we end up harvesting, but I feel like our average was about 3 to 4 points tokens only in a game.
So it's very hard to...
You have to maximize how many points you get. Already assume in your head, you're only going to get 3 trees to their full height. That's very tight. It's very, very, very tight. It's like, it's not as bad as Dominare. And we do appreciate Dominare, but Dominare, by the end of the game, you've done so much. You have all these plots and intrigue, and you can end up with scores that are below 10. And that's the good game. It's like, yes, I won with like 9 points. And that's okay. That's just the way Dominare plays out. So photosynthesis has that vibe at times. At least you will be double digits as long as you harvest 1 tree. You get a minor amount of points for remaining sunlight on your board, but it never goes beyond 7, which is half the highest value of the outermost ring of trees. So just saying, trees are the name of the game. It is not just about sun.
And expect a moment of panic because, I don't think the ducks sounded. That's funny. Expect a moment of panic because when you get the box, if you purchase it, you will have to build the trees.
Yes!
Which means the terrifying prospect of popping them out of the boards and then popping out that middle groove where the 2 trees meet.
They scissor.
And the annoying thing about it is when you're popping that out, sometimes the outer paper goes with it, and that might ruin your piece. So take your time.
That's a good moment to take a tip. And like, you may want a cutter handy to loosen that middle piece. And then worse is that they're not perfectly straight because it needs to be curved so that they lock. So there's a lot of like pushing, pulling,
forcing it. But then when it's not, okay, it does feel better.
Yeah, but it was a traumatic building process.
It was not as painful though as doing it for Heroes of Land errands.
Oh my gosh, that is a painful game to assemble, and that's literally you see the outer layer peeling
Because
off
that one had
as you put it together.
zipper teeth moments wherein it was all this
Yeah, these curvy
crisscrossing
lines.
and you had peeling all over. So
And then they went for like styrofoam coated pieces, but then the things just start coming apart. I mean, this has some risk to it. It has that kind of cardboard, but if you take your time with building it, as we just recommended, you will survive the tree building process. I think we definitely had some like not ideal moments and like certain trees that feel weird forever, but it works out.
and then I guess for me, my last one is it's a great game to play with kids because it is very visually fun, and it also tells you, it gives you a chance to talk about how trees need light, how as they grow they can cast shadows on each other, and it's a nice game visually. Just don't get too deep into the environmental message because then you'll realize you'll have to tell them, oh, to get the points you have to kill your biggest tree.
But
And
at least
do it again and again.
at least it only advocates cutting down the oldest tree and not
Yes.
the youngest.
Which is in the best way really to do it, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Because you're then making sure the life cycle of the trees are fuller, but you still are kind of targeting the tallest trees.
Yeah. And that is photosynthesis. It's crackers. But yeah, I cannot describe how cutthroat the game is. I mean, like I think that's the number one thing that surprised me the first time we played, and half the time you are ruining your own chances because your own trees are blocking the way, and it's oh my god, the math in your head of trying to figure out where the sun is going to be, which tree is going to block what, how much sunlight will I gather,
and the
from
fact that
that.
there is no random dice roll or anything
Yeah, it's just the
makes
little
every
Pac-Man walking
move
around.
count, because if you weren't paying attention, then you're gonna suffer and pay, and that's what makes this game much more painful than many others. But yeah, that's a photosynthesis. I think I have covered everything I want to say. Is there anything else you have?
Trees be shady. That's about it. All right.
So that's all the time we have for this episode. Mondays are always going to be about board games, if not other games. We're having another filled week because we were able to map out the schedule again. Yes, that's our third scheduled week in a row. And for this coming week, we have a bunch of episodes for you. Tuesday, for example, is our episode that will be all about photos.
Oh, but I went ahead and I opened the wrong image. I was promoting
It's okay.
Friday.
But
Okay.
Tuesday will be all about photos. Wednesday is most likely a role-playing game night, so we might not have an episode.
Mm-hmm.
Thursday is our episode all about
Footwear.
because we thought it would be an interesting thing in relation to Thursday and the practices that some are also practicing on that Thursday. Friday, however, is a night where we're having guests.
Yeah, so we have the wonderful drag ladies of Antutances, and one drag king, sorry. But it's Antutan because Anne is Queen Anita, Tu is Turing Quinto, Tan is Mrs. Tan, and Says is Samael Says. Oh, this is an older version, sorry. Samael Says Kant. So this is not the final poster, but yeah, they're going to be with us. So we're spending another Friday with drag queens, which is always a great thing. And yeah.
And then Sunday is our episode all about eggs because it's that Sunday.
Yeah, we haven't quite figured out the specific angle on it, but it's we're just gonna have fun with it. And just see how that goes. But that's our schedule for the week, and I've already posted it, and I'll continue to promote it. So expect to see. I'll be formally posting this this poster announcing Antutan Says being with us on Friday. So yeah, hope you can join us. It's going to be a good Friday. So funny. Okay,
Yeah.
close up.
Actually, I already did. But yeah, so that's all the time we have for this episode. We had a lot of fun, and we hope you'll join us again next time.
If you have questions or suggestions for future episodes, fill out the Google form at bit.ly, Pride Ideas. This was us, though. We chose what game to talk about. Why did we choose trees? Because it was Palm Sunday yesterday, and then we trees,
Yes.
palm,
Yes.
kind of works.
Because we didn't have really any other palm-related game.
And we don't have any Jesus games.
Well, of course. But I think the closest palm game we had would be Kodama. Because it's a growing tree as well.
That's true, but then it had spirits, and I feel
Yeah.
like it
So this-
implies a totally different religion.
This feels a little bit more religious. With that. Oh, there, see, look at it. Oh,
Savior tree.
the light. Oh, notice the light is on the word sin. Oh. Okay, go on.
You can follow us on Twitter, Altobi No Shade, RG Sunico.
You can also check out our blog, baduypride.com, for all the previous episodes and stuff about us.
Feel free to continue the conversation in the comments below. What was your shadiest photosynthesis moment? Or do you have a winning strategy that allows you to stay in the middle of the forest? Let us know in the comments below. It does seem to glow. It's a hot stamp element on it. Okay. Be sure to subscribe for notifications, whether on Facebook or YouTube, so you don't miss our next live stream. Once again, I'm Rocky.
And I'm Toby.
And this is Baduy
Pride.
Have a good night, everyone.